Yeah, this is one of my favorite songs, and I'm gonna play for you, cause it's your day, Joseph, and it's gonna be an amazing day. You ready for this? Let's go. Party people say, hey, it's your day, it's your day. The weather's getting ready, everybody ready, yeah, for your day, for your day. Celebrate and say, hey, 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 yeah. Sending this just because you're so amazing.
Joseph Jaffe. Why does that name sound so suspiciously familiar? Maybe because your secret screen name is Not Famous for You? What do you mean by not famous for you, Joseph? Chris Hansen here of Hansen vs. Predators. To catch a predator and have a seat with Chris Hansen. Now, Joseph Jaffe, I'm going to need you to have a seat right over there. I see some suspicious activity. Something about a television show, doing interviews, 200 guests, something like that. But Joseph, you are not famous. And the people on your show, well, they're not infamous like my shows. But remember, Jaffe is not famous. So let's keep it that way. I'll be watching and listening. Behave.
I just want you to know that I've practiced this word about 20 times to make sure that I did not mispronounce it.
I have a question. Has anyone ever said with all due respect and then not followed up with a zinger?
His side of the bed. If I come in and I'm on the other side, he will move it. Yeah, that's it.
Which side do you like? With all due respect, you make a good point.
Cheery Oreos, toasted Oreos.
Mute. He's muted.
I love what he's saying. He doesn't need sounds.
You're so small, squishing your head, Joseph.
You can.
Do it with me, Joe.
With all due respect, you really do look handsome, Bruce. Cheery Oreos, toasted Oreos.
Look at you. You are insane.
How did I do that?
You're
How did I do
insane.
that? You just made the intro reel. Yes, you did. Well, welcome to another episode of Joseph Jaffe is Not Famous. I'm kind of, but I'm not famous. And why would I be famous when I have the very famous Elliott Connie on the show? Elliott's going to be talking to us about solution-focused brief therapy, which I'm not sure if that involves boxes or briefs, or if it's just very short. But all I know is that it will get us to a solution. And God knows in today's crazy times, you need solutions. There are too many problems. As the old saying goes, are you part of the problem or part of the solution? Elliott he's not just part of the solution, damn it, he is the solution. Well, he'll be on the show shortly. I'm pleased to say that next week, Professor Alan Littman will be sharing with us his prediction for who's going to win the upcoming election. I mean, he's only been right 9 out of the last 10 times, and I believe the time he got it wrong was Bush v. Gore, which, depending on your perspective, maybe he got it right. But yeah, that one was hanging by a chair, if memory recalls. So he'll be coming in and he'll be sharing with us his prediction. Spoiler alert, I know who's going to win. And you know what? Don't go and find it out. Just join us next week and he'll walk us through his 13 keys. You can ask him some questions. It's going to be pretty awesome, as Larry David might say. Now, if you like the show, it is free. It always will be free, unless, of course, it isn't free, in which case it won't be free. But for now, just go to bit.ly/Joseph subscribe to the show and subscribe to the show. I'm very literal. And join. You can watch an archive of over 750 guests, but none as awesome as Elliott Connie. And yes, Elliott, I say that to all my guests, but still, it is true. You are my best guest ever. Now, in the mornings, I've been, because I don't have enough to do, I have the Collective Cafe in Chatter, which is social audio, a little bit of food for the soul as you're on the treadmill, getting the kids ready for school, commuting to the big bad city, focusing on a whole bunch of things. For example, just dealing with lately the fable of Icarus. I mean, Elliott, Elon Muskus, and the man who flew too close to the sun or to Mars and ended up crashing and burning. Maybe that's a bad analogy, considering we're talking about SpaceX. We've also been doing some live book reads, like The 4 Obsessions of an Extraordinary Executive, Crucial Conversations. So hopefully you can join us. And if you can't join us live, just go to bit.ly/collective cafe to go, where you can take a little bit of coffee with you in the morning. There's a podcast available for you. So that's just a little bit of the preamble, but now it is time for the seated soliloquy. And today's seated soliloquy, it's always connected to my guest. Today is called Be Kind. You know, I'm not going to lie. I've been known from time to time to have little spats with my wife. And the old saying goes, do you want to be right or do you want to be kind? You want to be right or you want to be happy? Do you want to be right or do you want to be kind? Of course, my response to her always is, I want to be right. But that's not the right answer, is it? The right answer is to be kind. What is it to be kind? What does it mean to be kind? What does it mean to be able to be kind to a fellow human being? Is it empathy? Well, I don't know. I'm going to ask Elliott the question shortly. I suppose it's a little bit of kindness, a little bit of empathy, maybe a little bit of generosity. Maybe it's just a little bit of grace, just giving someone grace during a time when they need it most. I think our default setting is to be kind. I think our default setting is to be happy. I think our default setting is to be able to spread love and spread joy, spread kindness, and yet somehow something gets in the way. Somehow something obscures us or causes us to lose our focus and forget about our prime directive, which is to be able to lift people up, to be able to help, to be able to extend a helping hand, to be able to make a difference in someone's life. Now, I don't know statistically, I'm not a psychotherapist, nor do I play one on TV, but I'm pretty sure there are benefits, short, medium, and long-term benefits to being kind, whether it's karmic, is that such a thing? Karma-ic, whether it is in this life or in the life to come. I'm pretty sure that a best practice in this world is to be kind. The best practice in this world is to get back to our roots, our core, which is kindness. And, you know, I have a suspecting feeling that by being kind, it may just prove to be right at the same time. So that's all I got in terms of my seated soliloquy. It's now time to bring my guest onto the show, Elliott Connie. Let me tell you a little bit about him. A complicated and less than ideal upbringing, like the one Elliott Connie had, can often break a spirit. So what then is the reason that some of us gain strength from our shortcomings and trauma? It was this question that initiated his journey into the world of psychotherapy. The spark that his question created within him led Elliott to get a bachelor's in psychology and a master of science in professional counseling. Over time, his personal and professional experiences taught him that resilience is what makes or breaks a human spirit. I love that. Resilience is what makes or breaks the spirit. His belief in human resilience is what caused him to fall in love with solution-focused brief therapy and learn the ins and outs of this approach. Connie has worked alongside some of the most prominent figures in the SFBT field. He has lectured all over the US as well as internationally in places like the United Kingdom, Russia, India, and Australia, and written 4 books on the solution-focused method. His aim is to inspire you and light the fire and passion that solution-focused brief therapy lit in him so that you too can help transform the life of others. Please welcome Elliott Connie. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, man. That was an amazing introduction.
Listen, I'm, all I'm doing in my little pea brain is I'm thinking to myself, wait, has he been to South Africa? Because you asked me if I was South African. Have you spoken in South Africa? Have you spoken in South Africa?
I've been to South Africa several times. I've been to over 30 countries. And people often ask me, including today, somebody asked me, what's my favorite place to visit? And without question, I always tell them South Africa.
Oh, you know what? You're gonna get a. I'm assuming not Johannesburg.
I love Johannesburg. I love Cape Town. I even love Bloemfontein. I loved Durban. I love South Africa.
But I mean, I'm from Cape Town originally. There's nothing quite like Cape Town.
There's no place in the world like Cape Town. And being Black, being an African American, there's also no place in the world like Johannesburg, where, like, if you go to Rosebank, there's Black wealth everywhere, and I had never really seen that in my whole life.
Rosebank, Sandton, and then I'm sure you went to Soweto as well.
I did. I went to Soweto. By the way, a little bit of trivia. Those of you listening, Soweto stands for Southwest Territory, I believe. No, Southwest Township. They shorten it and just call it Soweto. And it's famous because that was where Nelson Mandela lived before he went to prison and where he was released to prison. But here's a little bit of trivia. Did any of you know that Soweto is the only place in the world where 2 Nobel Prize winners live on the same street? And that was Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu.
I did not know that.
They lived on the same street.
Wow. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Now I have another question for you. Did you go to one of the gold mines? Did you go to Gold Reef City, or did you go down into a gold mine?
I did not do that. But I did go to a cave. Oh, where was I? It was called like the beginning of mankind cave or something like that.
I know the Kango caves in Oudtshoorn where the ostriches are. Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, there's a cave where they started discovering like early humans, and I did go into that cave, and that was a really remarkable experience, and that was in South Africa.
And what about Robben Island? Did you go there when you were in Cape Town?
Breathtaking. Yes, I did. I did.
So look, I mean, it's hard. You take Robben Island, you think of the greatest man, Nelson Mandela, Madiba, and the power of resilience. And I almost wonder if we should just dive straight into talk a little bit about resilience. This show will go from the sublime to the ridiculous and back to the sublime. So let's talk about that. I mean, could there be someone that is more resilient in terms of making or breaking the human spirit than Nelson Mandela?
Not that I can think of. So
how does one, I mean, a great man, a man who, I never met him face to face. I've seen him, but they would say that when you came into his presence, his hands were almost like a giant size. His presence, his aura was larger than life. It was almost supernatural. It's one thing to ask, how does a man like that show such resilience? It's another thing to ask how us mortals vulnerable, flawed human beings can show even a glimmer or an iota of resilience, like someone can't even dare to compare ourselves to Mandela. How do we find that balance? Pick and start with Mandela and work back to to this flawed human being. How do we learn from someone like Mandela, and how does the average Joe find that almost that above average power?
Joseph, you a minute ago you said we're gonna go from the sublime to the ridiculous and back to the sublime. So I'm just gonna like dive headfirst into the ridiculous, and I'm gonna say something that I mean to my absolute bones. It's gonna sound ridiculous, but like I want you guys, I want listeners, like, you gotta buy into what I'm about to say. And that is, you all have Mandela qualities within you. Like, it's not about like, how do we find the balance? It's about realizing that you are also Mandela, and Mandela was also you. Like, when I grew up idolizing Mandela. He was someone that I had a tremendous amount of respect for. I had a really difficult childhood, as you guys heard in the intro. And as a consequence of that, I became a ferocious reader. Reading became how my brain transported itself to other places. And reading is how I found inspiration. And somewhere along the journey, I found an autobiography book called Long Walk to Freedom.
A Long Walk to Freedom, yeah.
And I mean, I never, ever thought that I would have a chance to go to South Africa. And somebody invited me to speak at a conference in Cape Town. And while I was there, I learned that Robben Island is like a museum. You can go visit it. And I thought, I got to go do that. And I ended up meeting people that actually knew him. And I ended up learning more things about him. I've now been in South Africa a dozen times. And you learn things like he was flawed. He wasn't good in his romantic relationships. He had insecurities. He struggled with his anger and emotions at times. And I remember thinking, like, gosh, I thought he was angelic, right? Because he had accomplished ridiculous things that he had to overcome challenges unlike anyone else. I just assumed he was somehow grander than all. But I learned he was just as flawed as the rest of us, which made me realized, and that means we're all just as great as he was. The difference was he was able to tap into his resilience because he always had a connection to his purpose. And if you want to tap into resilience, you have to keep reminding yourself why you're doing the difficult thing. And all of us would do that. Like, for example, if I said to you, or like listeners, I want you guys to imagine this. If I said to you, I'll give you $10 million if you go run a marathon. Most people would say, I'm in. I will easily run 26.2 miles to get that $10 million. And because the purpose of the run is so grandiose, you'll keep reminding yourself of this. When you get tired, when your feet are sore, maybe it's cold, maybe it's windy, maybe it's raining, maybe it's hot, who knows? When you get uncomfortable, you're going to remind yourself, I'm doing it for this very specific reason. Now, if I said, if you go run a marathon and I'll give you a ham sandwich, that's probably not enough to trigger your internal resilience. What makes people accomplish amazing feats, whether it's like Nelson Mandela and fighting for justice, or endurance athletes climbing Mount Everest, or in my case, growing up in a really difficult environment and just dreaming of one day going to college and maybe one day graduating, is always remembering your purpose for doing the really hard thing. That if like the centerpiece of my work is I want to transform everybody I see to the most resilient, the most focused, and the most inspired version of themselves that they could be. I learned early on as a psychotherapist, there's nothing I can do to make your problems go away. There's nothing I can do to make life problem free. As much as I would love to, there's nothing I could do to accomplish that. Life is just hard, and it's going to be hard for all of us. We're all going to have challenges and things we face along the way. So at some point I started thinking maybe my work as a clinician isn't about solving problems. Maybe it's about preparing my client to be the best version of themselves they could possibly be so they can take on their challenges from that perspective. And that really is at the core of me. So I genuinely believe there is no difference between Mandela and the rest of us, and there's no difference between the rest of us and Mandela. The only difference was he had his purpose at the front of his mind every minute of his life.
It's beautifully said. And, you know, I love the concept. I'm sure that if we had asked Mandela, he would have said that he drew his inspiration from average people. He wouldn't have used the word average, but people that he met in his life, including his jailer, the story of the relationship that he built with his jailer, finding acts of kindness, random acts of kindness, and being able to draw inspiration from them. The other thing, of course, is the concept of being flawed. And, you know, and so often, I guess, we'll put our heroes and we'll put people on a pedestal. And by doing that, not only do we make them unattainable to us, but we also set them up by creating an unfair and a higher standard.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that we do that. It's a way of othering that we do that doesn't really serve us well. Like if we see an athlete like Michael Jordan and we just think like, wow, look at how much different he is from us because of how great he is at basketball. When the truth is, maybe he just worked really hard to master a skill, which leads to two thoughts, and they're both really wonderful. What if you worked that hard at basketball? How good would you get? And then the second thought, that's a really positive thought, is what if you worked that hard at anything else in your life that generated passion? What outcome would there be for you? A lot of times, and I don't think we do it on purpose, I think just a natural thing. We do this othering where we see somebody do an extraordinary thing, like Mandela, like Michael Jordan, like Albert Einstein, whoever it is, and we other, like, oh, they're so great. And the problem with that is once you do that, you are no longer acknowledging your own greatness. But when you can recognize, yeah, they're great, but there's a pathway to greatness that I can also walk down, then you like trigger your own internal greatness. And I think that's masterful. And let me give you an example, if I can run the risk of sounding a bit arrogant. I want to tell you the day I realized I was great. Because honestly, there was like a moment I realized I was great. I grew up and my father used to beat the shit out of me and he used to say horrible things to me as he was doing it. Such horrible things that like the scars of the horrible things lasted way longer than the scars of the beatings. So I grew up really genuinely believing the things my father had told me. I grew up genuinely thinking I was not worth anything because in very rude and lewd ways, that's exactly what my father told me. Now, I was a really good athlete, but I othered that in the way I was describing earlier. I was like, well, I'm a good athlete, but I'm bad at everything else. And like baseball became my respite. I'd spend a lot of time playing baseball and it brought me joy and it kept me out of the house. Like I was going to practice a lot. I was going to games a lot. So baseball kept me away from trouble. And I remember being in college, not feeling good about myself. I didn't feel like I belonged in college. I was only there because I could play baseball. And one day, one of my professors said, "Will you stay after class?" And to be 100% honest with you, I thought that professor was going to tell me, "You don't belong in college." Like, I genuinely thought, like, imagine sitting in the classroom, the professor says, "Hey, Elliott, I want you to stay after class." And I'm staying after class as all the other students kind of file out. And I fully expected that professor to pull me aside and say, "You're not really college material." But instead, the professor told me, "You're a really good student. What have you thought about doing with your life?" I had no idea. I hadn't thought about life. You know what I mean? I hadn't thought about what I'm going to be when I was just so grateful to be where I was. I really, when you don't think anything of yourself, you don't think about your future. So I wasn't thinking about my future. And I told this professor, "I don't know." And she said, "Well, you should think about it." And I remember walking to I'll never forget, I can close my eyes and see it. I remember walking from that classroom to the dorm room, and I was looking around, and I didn't have any money, so I couldn't afford all of my books. You know, you buy books for your college classrooms, and I couldn't afford all of my books. And I'm looking around, and I see all these other students, and they had parents sending them pizza money, and they had parents going shopping, and they had computers in their dorm room, and they had all these resources. And I remember thinking, like, I don't have any of those resources, but yet I'm here. And that professor just told me that she believes I belong here. And I remember in that moment thinking, maybe I have greatness in me. And that was the first time I had ever had that thought. I was 18, 19 years old. I had never thought about myself in that level of a positive way. But I literally said to myself, maybe I am worthy. Maybe there is something great about me, because that woman noticed something, and she's no dummy. She's a university professor. So maybe there's greatness in me. And my life changed in a moment. Like, did everything heal and get better overnight? Of course not. But it was like my life redirected. Like, from that moment, when I woke up the next day, I remember thinking, like, I want to see, am I a good student? I didn't believe her when she said it. When she said, "Elliott, I think you're a really good student," I didn't go, "Of course I am," right? My first thought was like, why would you think that? So then I remember waking up the next day and I was like, am I a good student? Well, in order for me to answer that question, I've got to be willing to try as hard as I can. Like, I really got to be willing to put forth maximum effort in my academic studies. And if I put forth maximum effort and I get mediocre grades, then she wasn't right. But if I put forth maximum effort and I get good grades, maybe I'm capable. And that's what I did. Like, the next semester, man, I put forth maximum effort and I got all A's. For the first time in my life, I got all A's. And I learned, so when people give me negative criticism, like my father, I don't have to listen to it. I can actually say to myself, is there any contrarian evidence to that negative criticism that person is giving me? So when my father is saying really horrible things, I get to ask myself, okay, so my father's telling me I'm stupid, I'm dumb, I'm never going to amount to anything, I'm no good at things. Is there any contrarian evidence to what my father just said? Well, now there is. I got straight A's in college. And I didn't even have all of the books required by the professors to do so. So now when my father would call me names, I didn't have to listen to it because I had contrarian evidence that caused me to believe my own greatness. And then the other thing that happened, it's like, so if I could find greatness in one area of my life, perhaps there is greatness in others that has gone undiscovered up until this point. So I went on a process of discovery. So when people asked me to do something, like, I remember one of my professors said, like, "Elliott, will you volunteer to do this thing?" And I was like, "Yep," because I might be good at it. Like, I've never done that thing you just asked me to do, but I'm going to say yes to this because I might A, enjoy it, and B, be good at it. And the only way I can discover, are there other areas of greatness that have gone undiscovered up until this point, would be to try new things. And it completely changed my life. Like, I mean, literally in an instant, I was a new person. I still had work to do and I still had processes to go through, but like my life completely reordered, and the direction my life was heading in became different instantaneously.
There's so much I want to respond to. And, you know, I was started thinking about this idea, which is something you talk about, which is the idea of transforming people's lives with internal dialogue and questions. And I'm thinking, you know, for every Elliott, there's 100 people. They have a dialogue going, but that dialogue is the opposite. That dialogue is reaffirming and validating that they're worthless. You know, their fathers, you know, believing the teacher or the parent that said you're not good enough, or even just believing that they're not good enough. And even with some of those little sparks of greatness, being able to say, well, you know, that's a fluke, or downplaying it, or minimizing it, or marginalizing, you know, that spark. There's a spark that can become a flame, that can become a raging forest fire of passion and purpose. But you can just as easily snuff out that little spark. And so there is a moment. I know there's a moment, a fork in the road. How on earth, how the hell does someone be able to take that path, the path you took, the path that Mandela took, and not actually succumb to the voices, the noise, you know, that drown out your spirit?
Well, first of all, Joseph, you're 100% right. And I want to say I was that person. Like up until 18, 19 years old, when that instant happened, I looked for evidence that affirmed my father's accuracy. And I did exactly what you said. When there were moments of good, I found excuses for them instead of ownership of them. So when something, like when I got a good grade on a test, I was, you know, I got lucky. Or when a, you know, cute girl in school had a crush on me, it's like, oh, she doesn't really know the real me. You know what I mean? Like I didn't, like, of course she's got a crush on me. I'm a great guy. Or of course I got a good grade on that test. I'm a smart student. I didn't do that. I think the way that you have to like shift is look for the loving people in your life. Because the woman who did that in my life, the professor, her name is Dr. Marilyn Pugh. That thing that I just told you about happened 25 years ago. I remember it like it was yesterday, and I love Dr. Marilyn Pugh to this absolute very day. So the first thing I would say is look for the people around you that love and care for you, and trust me, they are there. Like I was telling Joseph when we were getting on, like Joseph asked me where I am, and my answer to him was, well, I live in Texas, but I'm currently in Massachusetts. The reason I'm in Massachusetts is my 6th book, my newest book just came out. Here it is. We'll probably talk to you about it a little bit later. It's called Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. You can see it on Joseph's background right now.
What do you mean? I don't see it.
There you go.
Are we not surrounded by it right now?
Exactly. And I came to Massachusetts to deliver this book by hand to my best friend's parents. And the reason why I love them is because in my childhood, when I was dealing with real trauma and difficulty at home, they loved me and they filled me with love. Now, I didn't know it at the time, but they were doing it very intentionally. I just thought, you know, they're just nice people. Again, when your internal self-dialogue and self-worth is so low, you find excuses why good things happen to you. So I wasn't being loved by them because I was love worthy. I was being loved by them because they were nice people. Well, in my age, as I've matured and grown up, I realized, no, they decided to love me. Kyle's mother, one time when I was really young, when you're going through that kind of hell at home, you think nobody knows, right? You just think like nobody can see it. And one day I went over Kyle, my best friend, I went over his house and his mom said, hey, you can come over here anytime, right? And I said, yes, ma'am, I know that. She said, no, Elliott, I want you to listen to me. You do know you can come here anytime. You don't have to knock. The back door is always open and you can just walk on in. You do know that, right? I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, no, Elliott, I want you to really listen to me. You do know that you can come over here anytime you need to. I said, yes, ma'am. And for the rest of my childhood, I would just walk into their house. If they were home, I would walk in and I would, go play video games with my boy Kyle or go hang out, doing whatever. If they weren't home, I would just go in there because I didn't feel like being in my house, and I would, fall asleep on their couch or take a nap in Kyle's bedroom or whatever. But now looking back, like, they loved me. And it was because I was worthy of love. It was also because they're nice people, but it was also because they were worthy of love. So if you want to have that pivot in your life, look for the love and care in your life. It should have come from my own father. And it didn't. It should have come from my own mother, who is an angel of a woman. I love my mother, but she was so distracted dealing with my father. And if he was treating us, his children, that poorly, imagine how he was treating his wife. So it couldn't have come from my mother. It came from this other random place. But look for it, because when you'll see it, right? You'll see it. It came from this random professor that saw something in me and for whatever reason decided to tell me she saw it. So that's the number one thing I would say is, if you want to have that pivot in your life, if you're going through something really challenging, really difficult, and you're doing that thing I was doing where like all the negative things that happen to you just affirm the negative message that someone in your life has given to you, look for the loving people in your life. And then you ask yourself an incredibly valuable question, which is, what do they see in me that allows them to love me the way they do? And then the second thing I would say is find contrary evidence to any negative message anybody has given to you. Because I'm going to tell you right now, people give you negative messages because of them, not because of you. It's because of an internal flaw or an internal struggle within them. It is not because of you and who you are. And the problem with that is there is no perfect person on the planet. So if I decide to look at you and find your flaws, I'll find them because everyone has them. So when people start poking at your flaws, it's not because you're any more flawed than anyone else. It's because they have a vested interest in you being more aware of your flaws than of your brilliance. And it somehow makes them feel better. It somehow does something to them. And that has nothing to do with you, and you should not take responsibility for it. So whenever anybody in your life is giving you these negative messages, look as hard as you can for the contrary evidence. And that will start a domino effect. That will start a trickle-down effect. And that trickle-down will completely change your life. I promise.
So this is not trickle-down economics.
Which doesn't work.
Yeah, this is trickle-down loveonomics as well.
Yes.
I love that. Celeste Albert is here and she says, hi, I'm sure she's going to ask you a question, or she may comment or question a little bit later. I always try and find a quote for my guest. And I think this is the perfect time to share this quote with you. This comes from Ractivist. Kindness is doing what you can, where you are, with what you have. And the reason why I chose this moment to share the quote is it goes back even to the soliloquy of mine, this idea of this idea of digging deep and our default setting is kindness. And when someone isn't being kind, something is wrong, something is going on, and it's not wrong. There's nothing wrong with you. There's maybe something wrong with them, and the resilience and the ability to dig deep. So this quote, kindness is doing what you can, where you are, with what you have. How do you respond to that quote?
I love that quote. The only thing I would attach to it at the end is kindness is doing what you can, where you are, with what you have, without expectation.
Beautiful. Well, you just hacked. It's not ractivist. It's now hacktivist as well. So kindness is there is no there's no quid pro quo when it comes to kindness, or at least maybe to use your phrase, real kindness, true kindness, authentic kindness is to give without expecting back in return.
Yeah, and even a deeper level is doing something for someone that you know they cannot repay you for. And if you do something with expectation, that is no longer kindness, that's manipulation.
Great expectations or no expectations.
No expectations. Like, and again, going back to some of the people that have touched my life, my best friend's parents decided to love me, and they had no expectation of anything in return, ever. They just decided to do it. That's kindness. I think too often it's like, hey, I was kind to you, now it's your turn. Well, that's manipulation. You're being kind to elicit a behavior from someone else. But real kindness is, I'm going to do something for you with the only thing is that I'm focused on is I wanted to enhance your lived experience. Now, if it somehow comes back to me, great, I'll take it, and that's wonderful. But I didn't do it with that as the expectation.
Okay, so why aren't more people kind? And what do we do to change the world? You and me.
Well, number one is we do awesome podcast interviews like this one. We do awesome shows like this one.
All right, I'm going to give myself.
You should.
So I'm doing it already. Okay, I feel good.
And number two,
I'll do more of it. I won't give up.
Yeah, don't give up. I think we need to talk about it, and we need to spread kindness and love. We need to use love with the same level of passion that we use the word hate with. It breaks my heart that hate is a free-flowing word, but love is something we're kind of stingy with. And I think love should be something that we openly talk about. And then I think the other thing to answer your question is, why aren't more people being kind? I think people undervalue the power of kindness. And to be quite honest with you, I think people are really, really hurt and damaged. I think there's a lot of unhealed people. And that's why I became a psychotherapist, is to maybe change that. But when you are damaged, it almost all the time makes you the selfish version of you.
Well, of course, what I'll say is, going back to the very first part of this conversation, which is we're all damaged, we're all flawed, even the great Nelson Mandela. And when you kind of put that all together, it normalizes the inadequacy on one hand.
Yeah.
The other thing, Elliott, is I've just read, and I do business and leadership coaching as well, and I just reread Patrick Lencioni's The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And at the bottom of this pyramid is the concept of trust. And the thing that has just resonated and stuck with me is, trust is not, hey, Elliott, I trust that you'll show up on time to the podcast interview. Reliability, reputation, or I trust that you'll keep your word. Trust in context of a team and not just companionship, but collaboration, is the fact that if I am vulnerable with you, you won't use that vulnerability against me.
Right.
So my connection here is, if I am kind to you, you won't see that, God forbid, as weakness or or the fear that you would take advantage of me. It's all connected, I feel.
Oh, I think that's 100% true. And I think we live in a society where, like, if a politician says something kind, like, we need to be more kind to our fellow man, other politicians view that as weak. And if a politician appears to be hateful and angry, we misperceive that as strength. When actually being vulnerable and kind require more strength than any of those other things. And the reason why is exactly what you were saying. The more vulnerable I am and the more kind I am, the more available I am to being taken advantage of and abused. So to be kind and vulnerable requires the highest level of strength because you're inherently making yourself available to be taken advantage of and abused. But we can't have a better world without taking that extraordinarily courageous step. And I don't think there's anyone here that, when I say here, I mean like on earth, that wouldn't agree the world would be better with more kindness in it. But yet we too often fall short of being the instigators of that more kindness.
It's hard, but it's worth it. And
it's 100% worth it. I love I love the phrase, it's hard, but it's worth it. That sums it up to me.
Well, I told you we'd get a question from Celeste. Celeste said, what advice would you give to parents who are trying to teach kindness to their children? That's a great question.
Model it. That's the advice I would say. Model it. Show your children you doing something without the expectation of something in return. Go buy a blanket for someone laying on the street. Go provide a meal for someone that you don't think can afford it. Do those silly things. I don't know if you've seen those things when like people are going through the line at Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks and they pay for the car behind them. But like, do those things and let your children see it, because then they will understand how important being kind and generous is.
It's a perfect answer. It's a perfect answer. And you know, I think as a parent as well, sometimes we're human too. We need love too. We get inadequate. We need the quo pro.
Yeah.
But we have to dig deep, and we have to actually rise up above it. And sometimes it doesn't come from our kids, and sometimes we've just got to just keep, just keep on keeping on. It's hard.
It's very hard. But the one thing, I really think the secret to life is very simple. But I don't think enough people know it. And the secret to life is whatever thing is missing in your life, go give that thing out into the world and it finds its way back to you. There's that old saying, like, if you've lost your smile, the quickest way to find it is to help someone else find theirs. That's literally the secret to life. But we're so busy like hoarding that we don't realize the secret to life is actually in spreading and sharing. So whatever you might be missing in your life, go help someone else find that, and it finds its way into your life.
You've just come full circle with me, because I was thinking back when you spoke about $10 million to run a marathon, and I thought to myself, well, it's monetary. It's easy to quantify, and it's monetary. It's much harder when you talk about a higher purpose, or you talk about an incentive or a motivation that isn't easily measured or quantified in the most superficial materialistic mechanism. And I was thinking suddenly, like, talk about full circle, people that are struggling right now, as many people are, with financial burdens and money, and you can still be generous. You can still help someone out, because, as the old saying goes, Elliott, you think you're rich, someone's richer than you. You think you're poor, someone's poorer than you. It's just the way it is. Absolutely.
Like, when we first started talking, we began talking about the beautiful, great country of South Africa. And you're right. Like, I have had significant financial struggles in my life, but what you just said is so beautiful. Like, there's always somebody richer and there's always somebody poorer. And one time I was in South Africa. I was in Cape Town, actually. And if you guys, if people listening have never been to Cape Town, it's literally the most beautiful beaches. It's the most beautiful water town, or city specifically, I've ever been to. I mean, it is amazingly epic. And one day I was on the beach in South Africa, and I was having a moment where it's like, I can't believe my life has gotten to where it's gotten. I was just standing on the beach looking at this amazing beauty and just thinking to myself, like, I can't believe my life. I mean, I can't even, like, I was on the doorstep of taking my life. And now I'm an author and I'm really well known and I run this, 7-figure business and, life has changed. And here I am standing on this beach in South Africa. And I was like, wow, life has transformed. And I heard in that exact moment, I heard the unmistakable sound of child joy behind me. And I thought to myself, I wonder what that is. So I walk a little bit off the beach. I had to walk up this hill. When I get to the top of the hill, I see a bunch of South African kids, black kids, which in South Africa, that's relevant in terms of your poverty level. It's probably relevant to your poverty level everywhere, but it's very relevant in South Africa. And these kids are playing soccer. And I noticed, and there's, I don't know, maybe like 12 of them. And I noticed half of the kids were not wearing shoes. And the other half of the kids were. And they're just running around, playing, laughing, joking. I mean, these kids had smiles from one ear to the other, just playing soccer. And then one of the kids yelled, "Time out." And then they all stopped. And the kids who didn't have shoes gave them to the kids who did, or who the kids who did have shoes gave them to the kids who didn't. And I realized they were playing soccer and then taking turns on who got to wear the shoes. And I watched those kids and I was like, they're not fighting or arguing, or they are just experiencing joy and sharing in the experience on who's going to wear shoes and who won't. Now, I think about like some of my harshest moments, some of my darkest times. I might not have enough money to, donate thousands of dollars to, the St. Jude's charity fund or the insert whatever homeless or foster care. I might not have to, but if I went and I gave 50 cents to those kids, 50 cents would make a massive difference to their lived experience. So I think sometimes when we think about generosity, when we think about kindness, again, like we are so panicked and anxious and worried that we only focus on our own experience. But there are people in this world where if you handed them $1, you've just changed their week. And we need to remember that. Like, I'm not talking about, go find hundreds of dollars and give it. You could change someone's life with 50 cents if you pay attention. You can change someone's life with that old blanket that's like buried away in a box in your attic or basement that you no longer use. There are people on the street where I am right now in Boston. The temperature's dropping. It's turning into autumn fairly quickly. In the next couple of months, it's going to get very, very cold. And there are people who are going to perish because they're out on the street due to the cold. You could literally save their life by taking that old blanket and giving it to them. And that's what kindness is. It's not about donating millions of dollars here or there. It's exactly that quote: doing whatever you can with whatever you have, whenever you can. That's it. And if all you've got is this one little water bottle, there's somebody thirsty out there that doesn't. And right, if all you've got is that tiny blanket, there you go.
And not expecting anything back in return.
And no, not expecting anything back in return.
By the way, you will notice behind me, I've miraculously transformed into Cape Town in the background. So you made me feel a little homesick. Elliott, there was a question from Celeste. I think she might be my new co-host. She said, "What's the greatest act of kindness you've ever seen?" What? Another great question. See, I got no questions. I'm just actively listening.
Golly. So when I told you guys, like, my life has transformed, and one of the bits of transformation is I notice acts of kindness more consistently than I have before. So the greatest act of kindness, I just see them all over the place. But just because it's on my mind right now, the greatest act of kindness I've ever seen was my best friend's parents deciding I was worthy of care and love.
Yeah, and you spoke about that. So that's, that's beautiful. And it's carried, not only did it carry over and is stuck with you, but it set off this incredible chain reaction. Okay, so I have to ask you a question in the time we have left. My God, does the time fly when you're having fun? And I mean, I could listen to you for hours, but I will tell you something that I don't need to listen to you for hours because you are a man of many talents. I didn't even have time. Normally, I start this off to just do a little bit of an icebreaker, but let me tell you, Elliott Connie is not just the kindest man alive. He's also, for the past 30 years, his clothes have always matched. You don't even have to talk to me about this. I just wanted to just go back to the ridiculous. Number two, he loves to cook. That's you in a Michelin star restaurant. And of course, the final little fun fact is you do stand-up comedy.
That's true.
A little bit of AI. One thing I've realized is AI cannot make ugly people look good looking. You, sir, are good looking, because I've just given up on trying to make AI make me good looking. So I wanted to ask you just a couple of questions in the time we have left, because I thought we'd get to it before, but what actually is solution-focused brief therapy?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, people get tripped up on this name. But solution-focused brief therapy, it's a form of therapy that was created in the late 70s, and the originators of this way of working named it solution-focused brief therapy, so it's the name we're stuck with. It's not really about solutions, and it doesn't necessarily have to be brief. When we hear the word brief, we think...
But it is focused.
It is focused.
Okay.
But we hear the word brief, and we think, oh, it has to happen fast. But when it was created, when psychotherapy was originally developed, the only kind of psychotherapy that was going at the time was what we know as psychoanalysis. And psychoanalysis were created by Sigmund Freud. And you got to go to therapy 2 to 3 sessions a week for 3 to 5 years. So brief therapy is therapy that ends when the client achieves their aim, meaning they don't have to be in therapy forever. So that is actually what brief therapy means. It can take 1 session, or it can take 1,000 seconds, but it ends when the client has achieved their aim. And what makes this therapy different from other therapies, other than that, is we focus on the outcome the client wants to achieve from therapy instead of focusing on the problem.
Well, this is a breakthrough for me, because I always used to think that once you're in therapy for life.
No.
And so it's good to know that. I mean, this is beginning with the end in mind.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. We literally say that. We begin with the end in mind.
Listen, if you were my therapist, I wouldn't want it to ever end, because like I wouldn't want this show to end, but end it will very soon. If you are out there, I think you're going to Australia. Where else are you heading to?
Well, I'm heading to Slovenia. Tomorrow I'm going off to Europe, and I'm going to Slovenia. I'm going to Ramstein, Germany, and then I'm going to London, England. In the next 10 days.
Ramstein's where we have a base there, don't we?
We do. There's an Air Force base in southern Germany in Ramstein, and I will be at that Air Force base.
No way. That's that I know my history.
You
even though the accent may fool you, you may think that I'm from Staten Island, but actually I'm a proud citizen. I love it when people go, basically go back to your country. I'm like, actually, I'm not really sure where that is. Elliott, for those of you that want to continue to connect with him, you can find him on X. I believe X is still around. I'm not sure, but when last I checked, You can find him on Instagram, Elliott Speaks. You can connect with him on LinkedIn. Please go out and buy Change Your Questions, Change Your Future, Overcome Challenges, and Create a New Vision for Your Life using the principles of solution-focused brief therapy. Remember, it begins with the end in mind. It is all about outcome-based, and the outcome-based is for you to be a person that spreads love and spreads kindness randomly, unconditionally, make the world a better place. And if you need any help along the way, just go to elliottconnie.com and connect with this wise, vulnerable, slightly flawed man. I mean that as a compliment, if you know what I mean. Elliott, it's been an absolute joy to spend time with you tonight.
Me too, man. Thank you, and thank you for the work that you do. It's important.
You're welcome. Now, I've spoken in 50 countries, by the way,
wow.
but I've never been to. We're gonna have to swap notes one day.
Yeah.
What's the craziest country or craziest place you ever spoke at?
Bolivia.
I was close.
No. Which one is in South America? Bolivia.
As Mike Tyson once said, I'm going to fade into Bolivian.
Yeah, Bolivia is the craziest place I've ever been.
I've been to Venezuela. I've spoken in Caracas in Venezuela.
I have not. I
see.
Not.
And actually, Simon Bolivar is pretty much, I don't know, he pretty much owns or owned half of South America. But that's another story for another day. One day, Elliott, we will bump into each other.
I hope so.
And hopefully it won't be random. And who knows, we might even see Chuck Norris there to greet us. Here's what he had to say about you.
You are Chuck Norris approved.
And we will be back soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. Good night.
Thank you for watching the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show, and if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.